Game 9, I actually happens to like this game. There's a reason behind this one. This opening that being played in Game 9 is a favorite opening. I feel like it's the only way to play effectively if you're playing in a World Championship. It's a complicated stuff. Very high level stuff happened in this game between both those players. I feel like this game is a major opening has been played, and the precision between both players has been nice, especially Ding. So let's dive in. Game 9, we have d4. Gukesh is not playing e4 nowadays. Now he feels against e4, e6. This maybe brings some nightmares for him. He may be able to play d4, for the remaining of the games. So we have d4 and then knight f6. I think Gukesh played knight f3. We had d5 and then it transposed. But, knight f6 is very common against d4. You could also play d5. C4, very common. And then we have e6. Now, white has a couple options. You could play knight f3. And let me explain why Gukesh move order makes a lot of sense. We have g3. Now, let me explain. This is perfect example why g3 makes a perfect sense. If you Catalan player, in move 3, you could force a Catalan. This is a Catalan right now. No other openings. You don't transpose to any other openings. If you play knight f3, which you may somehow also transpose the Catalan, however, you have two openings you have to face, and you have to study them. One of them is, not so great. I don't think this is a Bogo Indian. Should you play bishop check here, bishop b4? It's not great, but it's still an opening. The other opening that you're also avoiding is actually this, which is Queen's Indian defense. It is playable. I wouldn't rule it out that Ding could play something like this. It's two different openings that you have to face. If you're really into the Catalan and your opponent plays knight f6, d4, knight f6, you really, if you think about it, d4, knight f6, there's two major openings. You could force the Catalan, or your opponent could play g6, maybe King's Indian. So it cuts down to the studying effectively. So you may not learn the Queen's Indian defense at all, or the Boko Indian defense at all if you play g3. And this move order seems key, and this is actually where Gukesh is saying we are playing the Catalan. I like this move order a lot. It just cuts down the studying. Why should I play the Queen's Indian defense? Sometimes people would argue and say Queen's Indian defense is not greatest opening, perhaps. Maybe white has more slightly ideas. So maybe people could argue and say, I could play knight f3 and I'm happy to play the Bogo Indian because they are not great openings. But you still have to study, though. It's still like you have to study them. Players, advanced players, grandmaster level, they do study this kind of stuff. So they could play knight f3. Which is perfectly fine. If you are the kind of player that you want to cut down on your studying, you could also be a grandmaster and play g3, which actually Gukesh did. And a lot of people do this. They just feel like we're gonna be, Catalan. I just want to play the Catalan and force the Catalan kind of setup. And I actually feel like it's a good choice. If you're cutting down the studying and you spent all your time studying the Catalan, it's a good choice. d4, knight f6, c4, and g3 Catalan. d4, knight f6. c4, and then g6. You have to study the. You could also have to study the Grunfeld too, and also you do have to study. So it's 3 studying opening instead of like 5, right? So cutting down the studying may make sense for a lot of people. So g3 makes a perfect sense here. I believe it's a good idea. And we have here. This is not the Bogo Indian. This is Catalan, entirely different. These just feel like this move order does matter between openings. This actually has been trending. Let me just give you a quick introduction about the Catalan. Catalan is very strong opening. Most lines seems to be favoring white. Black could equalize in some lines, but it almost feels like white is always active, especially when you get to the bishop on g2. This bishop becomes like really difficult to counter. There are some lines you could play against it, as I mentioned, and Ding actually is known for the Catalan. I mean, for the white's perspective. So I'm assuming if his opponent plays the Catalan, which is Gukesh, Ding may have to be like familiar. I mean, this is all these moves are like, he probably knows all about them, even if there's a sideline, he's probably aware of this because he's playing it, he's playing it for the white side. So this is very good stuff, this being a line that people, lately a lot of grandmasters playing it, and it seems reasonable, but I feel like still the Catalan is pretty annoying. This may be some reason people play d5, d4, d5, just please play Queen's Gambit, decline, or, and we don't have to face a Catalan, ever. But, d5, it's a good choice, and then knight f3, this is actually how you play the Catalan, and then you castles, and then c6, this is possibly the close Catalan, if I'm not mistaken. It's a good way. The fun begins after taking here, which is really complicated stuff, and usually the bishop on g2 becomes like a beast throughout the game. I think the close Catalan, if I'm not mistaken, that's what they call it. It's a good stuff. And you kind of not allowing, if you could think about it, it's like almost like a semi-Slav kind of structure, and you put some blockade with the pawn so the bishop doesn't come across on e8 as easily, or the diagonal. We talk about the diagonal pretty much. So we have queen c2, which is very strong, and then we have knight bd7, rook d1, and we have b6, and then bishop c3 here, and I felt like this is a sideline. Usually, what white's trying to do here in e4 and opens up for this diagonal. This is actually the idea come across is you play some kind of e4 and then you kind of prove that this bishop is strong, even in the close kind of land. So bishop c3, I don't think this comes as a shock per se. Like, it's easy for black to play, I think, maybe. The idea is you have like bishop e6, bishop b7. And for somebody with Ding, with the experience that he has with that kind of line, I don't expect him to get in trouble in this line. I mean, bishop b7 is reasonable, and it makes perfect sense. And then we have knight bd2, and then we have queen c7, and then we have here. I felt like rook c8, rook d8, and it feels like this position is equal. Even after bishop c3, I think the idea here is some kind of b4 maybe by Gukesh. Having the bishop on c3, some kind of b4, try to prove that he may have some play on the queen side. And we had rook here, and we have b4. So the idea of b4, let's say black play here, you have c5. And the idea of c5, he's trying to prove that the bishop on b7 is like a pawn, and not so much like a bishop. You can still play bishop e6, but I mean, you're putting up this kind of structure. Black position may start looking like it's cramped. And you need to do something. I think getting to c5, black has to do something to avoid this kind of stuff. And I think Ding's next choice is extremely strong. He spent some time here, and he still spent enough time here. But I think the next move is really strong. c5. Actually, I don't know if this is a good stuff by white or black. You don't normally see this happening on the Catalan. Usually, if you were able to get this kind of structure with the Catalan, meaning that the bishop sitting on b7, countering the bishop on g2, then the Catalan is not as strong, or it becomes equal. So I felt like c5, black must be really equal and happy with his position, because now there's no issues in the opening per se. This game is entirely different from the previous games, where I think, opening wise, even though, Catalan is a big opening and I recommend playing it, even for Gukesh perspective, but I think Ding may be well prepared in the main lines, even against the sidelines. Maybe when Ding plays it against Gukesh, maybe it's an interesting situation, right? Because, this is opening that Ding played it for a lot of years. However, in c5, has to be really the game is pretty much equal. Not much issues going on happening here. So he took here, b takes, Gukesh, and here. The next move is kind of strange to me by Gukesh. It's actually I don't understand it pretty much. Queen b2. I understand it, but I don't like it. I felt like the only way to play for white is to play here. And I think here you have to take with the knight. You could also, I think Ding was looking at some kind of queen takes during the press conference, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if queen takes is a move here. He was looking at queen takes in some lines, but I think let's say you take with the knight. There's potentially you take here, here, and then, or this move order may matter. You may do this. And by the way, should you take here, you have to be careful. This is a problem. Should you take here, which you may feel like it's the only way to protect on c5, right? You're getting hit by this, and then something like here and g4, and you eventually have to lose something here, which is losing position. So what you have to do is pretty simple. You have to take here. The bishop has to sit on e7 to defend, so let's say something like this. However, I felt like 92, 91, should you take on g2, and then something like this. I would rather be white. It feels like this is the only way you could play on. I mean, Gukesh playing this on this position, would it be interesting? I feel like the endgame may actually be complicated, considering the double pawns maybe here could be an issue. The knight here, you don't have the two bishop pair anymore, okay, but you know, the knights may jump in a certain, I could see like potential c4, e4, knight f4. It is possibly the best continuation for white to get something going here. I was a little bit surprised that this actually didn't, was not happening, didn't happen. So we had queen b2, and I don't understand this move pretty much. Maybe he's putting some pressure on here with the bishop, but I mean, there are ways you could play here, queen b6. I mean, maybe queen b6 is much more than, much more effective. And there's not much going on here for white's perspective. I don't think he's ever going to take and putting some pressure on here. It's easy to play for black. And even Ding move is pretty much reasonable here, knight b6. And it's funny now, what happened next move is bishop e5. And I think, this pin may be annoying, but I feel like around here, which actually did happen, maybe rook takes c4, the right way to play this position. I don't know. It may still be equal. It was a potential way to take on here, but after here, we had knight here. And it's funny that knight takes, this equalizes pretty much in favor for Ding. And it's easy to make, Ding could make easy move here. Should you take here, here? You have to watch out because this is actually losing, I believe. And then it should be winning for, for black. So obviously the right way to deal with this is simply takes, hold on, takes, you take here, and then takes here, queen takes. And the queen would be attacking here. I think this knight d7 is pretty much a draw. There's not much going on in this position. You're looking at bishop here. You have to consider this possibility. And also might be tricky in where this queen is going. You may feel like the long diagonal is doing some ideas for white. It is, but the queen placement is always like rook b8 kind of stuff. This is actually the only way to go. And I think Ding should have played this effectively. This actually like heading toward the draw fast enough. So this was an easy way to play. For Ding perspective. We had a bit of like a strange move by him after here. He didn't have to do this. I think he didn't see knight d7 in the previous line, and he felt like he's obligated. If he didn't see knight d7, then he felt like he's obligated to take on f3 first, and then. But however, you do have to take. On takes b6. By the way, I don't know. I don't think this works because you could just play here, and that should be winning for black here. It should be good. Should be good for black. So obviously around here you have to take on b6. I believe with the knight, with the bishop, and then you take back. And I think actually this is all happened, if I'm not mistaken. All this happened. So this happens, and takes, and here you're attacking the rook. White has some play after rook here. The reason bishop takes f3 is not the best for black because you could also play knight e5, and it's not an easy position. and then maybe e3 next. This some maybe in some knight c6 ideas. I think this is the best way you could continue the game from White's perspective. It may end up in a draw though, and it may not be, but it's slightly annoying for White. Excuse me, slightly annoying for Black to play this one, but it's but it's may still be a draw. But if it's anything, this is actually the way you play the game. You know, if you want to effectively play the game for more moves, we could explain why, because after here and then queen b5. I don't like queen b5 because this actually feels like a draw right now. Easy move to make for Ding. And this is where the defense resources from Ding kicks in. So I don't like queen b5. I think by far knight e5 was probably a better idea along with e3. Queen b5 just takes, and even knight takes, and then we have queen e7. By the way, this does not trap the knight because you could take here. There's some back rank issues for, you know, could happen, but the idea is queen e7 first, and then you play queen b1, and then rook here. Now, Ding was able to discover that, you know, once you go to queen b, once you take here, you just simply play rook e6. The idea is very simple. You just take here, takes, and then you take here. Everything is covered. The back rank doesn't even have an issue for Black. So let's go for a line here. I think this is actually what happened. So let's say here and you know, queen here. You could try this, but it doesn't do you anything. If you take, then there's a mate. Right, so you have to, you know, block with the knight and then checkmate. But the problem is actually in a situation like this, you just play knight e8, and then your queen is under attack. You cannot play this because you could simply, I believe you could just take back. So there's not much going on. Actually, here maybe you just take the queen. You could possibly take the queen, and in some lines. But Black does not have problems here. Like, you know, he could easily equalize as long as he just stops. You know, he just doesn't take here. And Gukesh was able to find all this kind of stuff. You also have to be careful how to take. You cannot take here because this leads to a mate. Rook d8. You have to be precise. And here it's also like queen c8. Actually, here maybe this. Potentially this one. Oh, maybe here. Where's the winning line here? I feel like here it's possibly something like this. Yeah, rook e1 is possibly winning here. And there's some issues because White would become really active with the pieces. And the back rank would remain to be an issue. So this feels like it's winning. However, you don't have to take, you know, Black. Black only has one way to take, and if we go back here, because this is actually what happened, you just take with a queen, and you have to keep the rook, rook at b8, and if queen takes queen, you just have to take it with the other rook, and you don't have anything here. I mean, this is actually a draw. And I'm actually a little bit surprised by rook c6. I mean, this position is drawn. I felt like both players would need a draw here. Maybe just keep the rook on, like rook e1 or something. I feel like it's a draw. I don't think it's rook c6 is a bad move or anything. I actually feel like the knight is better than the bishop in this kind of ending. And, you know, this may be slightly annoying, but it's still like after g5. So you could put your pawns in dark squares and it becomes a little bit annoying. But I don't think it's the highest level. I don't think you could lose this like by White or anything. So they blitzed some moves. Maybe Black was, you know, had some activity. I don't think it was necessary for White to allow this. King g7, we have here, rook e1, here, and then bishop b5. Maybe it's easy to play. And then here, and then we have knight over, knight e5. This is actually what I mean by the knight getting so active. It's not needed. And then f4 is a little bit pushing it, but it's not enough to like win or anything. Black is active, but it's not active in a certain way that he could create any kind of issues for Gukesh. So after trade here, I think this rook ending is pretty draw. Even there are some lines where you could even take on h3 and it still draws. But obviously White, you know, would not allow you to take. So we have here, we have here, we have king g6. I think Dink could have played on for a little bit. There was like some tricks like f6, you know, and then king f5, check here, e5, and it wasn't that easy for white to defend like the pawn at d3, so white has to place a couple more moves. I was a little bit surprised by the next move actually by Ding. So he played f6 and then actually here maybe he could have played like, you know, some kind of rook here or here. I mean, I don't think it matters much, to be honest. This is a draw position, but maybe he has some ways to play. There was people saying maybe f5 in some line. It was h4 just to try to get rook h2 in some lines. This is like a dream kind of situation where you assuming that you're winning a pawn and you may win the standing game. This is all draw. White able to have enough moves, enough resources to draw the game. So king f5, and I think here is just basically, I mean, Ding should have probably offered a draw, but the problem is after here, and then he takes, he's just basically, so even here, king e2, you could give up a pawn and it becomes easy draw. Takes, king f2, h4, king g2 here, and then this is a simplistic draw. Nowhere is, you know, no way you could win this one, even trading here, and then he give up the pawn, and we have a draw. Very good game, Catalan, effective opening, and the match still tied. I think, so they had the rest day in the next couple hours. They're gonna play game 10. Now, the situation is there's limited games left. I think there's like 4 or 5 games, where Ding will play 3 whites. That may give Ding a little bit of room to play effectively. I mean, so far when he had white, he did not achieve much. I mean, he played the English now, he plays the Italian, he played the London. I actually expect that Ding would play actually the London again. I have a feeling that he may play the London. He may have another idea with the London. You know, maybe he's looking for no risks now because there are limited games left. You may just want to play it safe. You don't want to take any kind of risks. So even with white, you may say London. We may have like a prepared line and then try to force Gukesh to defend. He could try to play, let's say, d4. If I think d4, maybe Gukesh will play d5. I mean, if d4, Gukesh play knight f6, we may see a Catalan by Ding. But I think I wouldn't see e4. I don't see a situation where he could play e4. He could. e4 could be played, you know, and then he could play, you know, Italian again. So anything is possible. But I think he's going to play it really solid. He had the rest day. He may be, you know, feeling that he's able to put some slight pressure on Gukesh because there's limited games left. However, I feel like the next couple games will be thriller. It's going to be really fun to watch. Again, time management is really a problem. Hopefully, both players are able to like slightly play faster in the opening and keep their time reserved for like critical positions. You don't want to like play like critical position where you end up playing fast. You might lose the game because of playing fast. So obviously, the next couple games will be competitive. We expect challenge. Should the game goes all the way, the match should go all the way to tie breaks. I'm not a fan of tie breaks because it's faster time control, and I'm always a fan of more long games, more games. Should we have like, let's say 50 games and instead of 14, you know, you would see a different kind of positions and risks people taking. Not many draws per se. Two players are gonna take a lot of risks in their games, but since it's 14 games, it's gonna be like tight. Sometimes you could win one game and you could still win the match. Should you try to draw the remaining of your games if you can. So obviously we still have some games to go, and stay tuned for more game review, folks. See you soon.